You about to land at the airport in bad weather, surrounded by the rain and thunderstorm. But that doesn't bother you because you have faced them many times, and this time will be another piece of cake. But in just minutes from touchdown, however, the plane makes a sudden drop. You apply full power and pull the yoke towards you, but it doesn't work, and the plane continues falling down towards the ground. This is what the pilot of this L-1011 is facing. Will they be able to pull this plane out from the dive, or they might become another victim of this invisible killer of the sky? This is a story of Delta Airlines Flight 1901. It's a hot summer day of August 2nd, 1985. The city of Dallas had already suffered from the heat throughout the day. The evening rain shower helped Dallas from the heat, but it wasn't very good news for any plane coming in and out from the airport. And Delta Airlines Flight 1901 is one of them. The flight started from the Fort Lauderdale in Florida and will make a last stop at Los Angeles in California with a stopover at Dallas, Texas. The takeoff from Florida went so uneventful, aside from a need to deviate from the thunderstorm along the way. 152 passengers and 11 crew expected nothing but another pressure trip. Nonetheless, they didn't know what's waiting for them in a stormy evening of Dallas. This aircraft is a Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, joined Delta in 1979 as November 726 Delta Alpha, and had operated ever since. The L-1011 TriStar is the first and only tri-jet passenger plane built by Lockheed. This plane had 3 engines like DC-10 but more advanced than its rival and had ability to land itself. Despite not being so popular like the Boeing 747, Delta Airlines extremely loved it. More than 70 TriStars joined the fleet of Delta, and November 726 Delta Alpha is one of them. Flight 1901 is approaching Dallas from the east, and pilots begin preparing the aircraft for landing. First Officer Rudolph Price Jr., a TriStar expert, is a pilot flying this plane. He was joined by Captain Edward Connor, the pilot monitoring. He was very strict to the company policy and always listened to his flight crew. And they were joined by the flight engineer Nicholas Nasick, the observant, alert, and professional crew of the group. The controller cleared Flight 101 to descend to 10,000 feet and gave a heading of 250. Captain Connor refused. They don't want to go into a storm and want to avoid it if possible. So the controller gave a new heading, and the plane was turned away from the storm. This came to a relief for pilots, especially Captain Connor, as they don't have to face a bumpy weather. Even though it added significantly delayed to the flight time, it was the right thing to do. If not, the pilots saw the storm, they would do the same as well. As the plane descends to 9,000 feet, the weather at the airport is getting worse. A storm began to build up at the north of the airport. There's a heavy shower rain at the front of the runway 17 left, a very runway that Flight 1901 was scheduled to land, and visibility dropped dramatically, so the IFR is a must. Plus, ahead of Flight 1901, there are small Learjet who also going to land at the same runway. To keep space between them, a controller ordered Flight 1901 to reduce the speed to 180 knots, and the distance between those planes increasing. Then, Flight 1901 was given instruction to intercept and line up with runway 17 left before descending down to 2,300 feet. The pilot acknowledged the instruction and slowed down to 160 knots. At this point, the landing checklist was performed, the landing gear was lowered and the flap was fully deployed. Just ahead of them, the Learjet had landed at runway 17 left without any problem. Right now, the storm is getting bigger, but if the Learjet can land, the Delta plane can do the same. But at that moment, First Officer Price saw a lightning and said,
Lightning coming out of that one.
What?
Lightning coming out of that one.
this was a confirmation that the pilot had saw a thunderstorm. The airline had told them to abandon their approach and went for go around or find any airport to land, but they didn't do it. Who's scared? Let's keep going. The pilot had reached the red line and they were about to play dearly with their life, because that invisible killer is now making his appearance. That invisible killer was named the microburst. The microburst is a strong cry of downwind which occurs in a small area, originated from the large and sinister cumulonimbus cloud, aka stormy cloud. It occurs when the warm air go up, alongside with the cold and heavy air come down with impressive speed. The microburst is very hazardous to the aircraft, and sometimes it can be invisible to the pilot's eye. When it strikes on the ground, it scatters to all directions, similar to water coming out from the tap, but in a bigger form. So how the microburst killed its target? We need to take a closer look on how the plane behaved when entering it. Mr. Microburst had made a silent appearance at the front of the runway 17 left, and Delta Flight 101 unaware entering the front section called headwind. The headwind had caused the speed to rise from 150 knots to 173 knots, fooling the first officer to reduce power to the engine, making the plane vulnerable to the next section of the microburst. The plane is now entering the second section called downdraft. The downdraft is a type of wind that comes up from above, and this is a very dangerous section of the microburst, because it will cause the plane to lose its speed and altitude, and the plane will begin dropping like a rock. Realizing what they get into, all engines were put into a full power, and the first officer trying to push the nose down, but the plane doesn't respond to his command. The aircraft is beyond recoverable and began to falling down from the sky. The only thing the pilot can do is to fight for survival. Desperately, the captain shouted "Toga," meaning he wants to abandon an approach and went for a go around, but it's already too late.
Push it up. Push it way up. Way up. Way up. Way up. That's it.
Finally, the aircraft entered the third section called tailwind. This wind is unfavorable on landing because it will come from behind. The aircraft came out from the microburst in one piece, but didn't have enough altitude to climb or the speed to generate a lift. Along here it came down hard and landed at the field north of the airport. With all engines still in full power, it continued traveling past the runway 114 at high speed. As the left engine struck a Toyota car on the road, a 28-year-old driver was killed instantly. A controller was in shock, seeing Delta plane coming out in very low altitude. He called Flight 101 for go around, but there's nothing the pilot can do.
Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
The plane coming down hard at the short of the runway, spinning to the left, and crashed into the water tank near a runway 17 left, leaving only the rear section that managed to get away from the rest of the aircraft. Out of 163 people, only 27 survived. Most came from the rear section of the aircraft. Some people from mid-section also survived, but they suffered from bad injury, including burn. But the front one, no one, including 3 pilots, survived. The NTSB had concluded that the flight crew decision to continue the approach despite of seeing a thunderstorm alongside with microbursts, lack of training on how to deal with the microbursts, and the lack of the windshield hazard information from the airport as the cause of this accident. Delta 101 is not just the only victim of this invisible killer. This kind of accident had happened before, like in the case of Pan Am Flight 759 at New Orleans and Eastern Airlines Flight 66 at JFK. They too were the victim of the microburst. That's enough, they said. The microburst fun was over. We will not allow that invisible killer to take down another plane from the sky again. A research was launched, and now we have this thing called Doppler radar. This thing will detect the sudden change in the wind, including wind shear and microburst. If the microburst was formed, the pilot will be warned immediately and avoid being swallowed by the microburst. If they accidentally entering the microburst, they will now be trained how to deal with it and escape from becoming another victim. The windshield warning had now been installed inside every cockpit, and the pilot were now being told to avoid windshield at all costs. Even though it came too late to save 1901 from a doom, all things have changed, and the death of 136 people should not be in vain.